Hello, career thought leaders. They're good to see you here today. And we are just ecstatic to have Jacqueline Peros with us, who is a branding expert. And now, Jacqueline, you've got quite the background because you were in marketing in tech, and now you're also an image consultant, do personal branding. Tell me a little bit about your background. Where did you start at in tech?
So I was in product marketing and branding and did that for a fairly long time, and then I switched over to, I think what I missed was the interaction with people, which was I was trying to lean into my strengths, and I was in B2B tech, and it was internal, and I just sort of had this aha moment that I needed something more. And I went back to school and I went to FIT and did an image consulting program, and then further added to my certifications to the personal branding and did the master certification piece. And I get to work with amazing women. So it feels,
Yeah,
it fills my soul. So
I love that.
mhm.
Let's see, we got some comments coming in. Image consultant. What? Oh, yeah, John. So tell us a little bit more about what that means.
Image consulting is really how I describe it, is the ABCs of your image. It's the appearance, behavior, and communication piece. So it's all of that, how you present yourself visually, and then the personal branding layered on top of that is really having a clear understanding of who you are at your core, so that all those other pieces fit into it. So it was to me, branding was the overarching piece that was missing to my image consulting. So,
Yeah. Well, and I bet, I mean, we as career professionals, we work with clients who need to have an image of a certain kind to be where they're at in their career, but they also have to have that authenticity. And so I'm guessing that the personal branding helps put those two pieces together.
yes. And then it also supports your brand, right? So if you look at the appearance piece, your wardrobe and your accessories and things like that, once you understand who you are at your core, all those, the image piece, the wardrobe piece helps to really support it and bring your personality forward visually.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, today we were going to talk a little bit about positioning because there's that internal piece of who are you, but then there's this external piece of who's your audience and who are you trying to work with. And I told you this story, but I had a person reach out to me, I don't know, about a year ago on LinkedIn. And they said, I'm a graphic designer and a marketing person. I'd love to work with you. And that was it. Like, that was their pitch. And I just thought, well, this is kind of a problem I see over and over with job seekers, is that they maybe know who they are or what they do, but they don't take the time to figure out, so what? What does the audience care about in that? How do you solve their problems? And how do you want to solve their problems based on your brand?
Right.
And so this kind of came out of this conversation around the power of personal branding, not just in knowing who you are, but then how that lets you be flexible. And you were
Right.
talking to me just a moment ago about how that shows up when you're working with young professionals in tech.
Yeah. Yeah. The when so I used to work with mid-level, senior folks, mid-level to senior folks. But my passion really is working with the young professionals, because I help them mitigate those career mistakes, right? So sort of being that guide for them. And I think oftentimes they feel that they don't have that experience. They don't have enough experience to add significant value to an organization. They don't know necessarily how to position themselves, because they said, well, I don't, I'm just here a year or two. And what I focus on with them is having them understand that being adaptable and flexible, and I work with many young professionals, women in tech. Being adaptable and flexible is it's a strength that employers are embracing more now than ever, because we have a very evolving job landscape, and things change quickly. In tech, they could change on a daily basis, and you have to demonstrate that you can pivot quickly. And that is a skill now that a lot of employers are looking for. So I work with them on really identifying the fact that they are young and they can embrace change sometimes more easily than somebody that is more seasoned, because they're sort of in this very structured mindset.
Right. And we were talking about how it's kind of counterintuitive that the more solid you are in your brand, the easier you can adapt. And that brand serves as those roots so that you know who you are, and then you can adjust based on what the environment's looking for, right?
Exactly. So when I take my clients through the methodology, um, the personal branding methodology, it helps them to sort of reconnect with that brand. That's, we all have a brand inside of us, right? Some don't. Under the work that I do, you do too, Marie, is really have someone reconnect with what that brand is, and then be able to articulate it so that you feel comfortable in demonstrating and articulating what those unique strengths are, and not feeling bad about it. And so the conversations become easier when there are opportunities that come up in an organization. You'll be able to identify that as something that your skills, your unique skills, can be aligned with, and you don't necessarily have that hesitation to go after that opportunity.
Yes, yes, and we talked about this a little bit, but how people you go in and you talk to groups of people, usually young professionals, and they really don't understand what branding means.
Right.
So how do you explain that to them?
So I always start with a definition of personal branding, because I think, you know, it's great on a positive note. Personal branding is very popular now, right? But I think there's sort of this misconception of what personal branding is. And the piece that I think is always missing in how people understand personal branding is it's what you think about yourself and what you want to communicate to the world, but not factoring in how others see you or perceive you. And those two things need to align in order to effectively communicate your brand and it be authentic. You might
Right.
say, oh well, I'm a leader, I'm considered charismatic, but some might not see you that way. That's how
Yeah.
you might feel about yourself, but that might not come across in the organization. So it's really about extracting who you are at your core and positioning yourself for a very favorable, positive first impression also, right? So how you see yourself, how others see you, and that they're aligned.
Right, and that it's, 'cause we always talk about extracting your brand because it's not made up, it's not how you want to be seen, although you can mold it a little bit, but it's really kind of what is that that's coming from within that then you can connect. So you talked about the internal piece and the external piece, but then there's this audience piece too, right, of the brand, because your brand, we don't want it just living over here in a vacuum. We want other people to see the value in that. And that comes
Yeah.
from you too.
Right. And it's really understanding who who you need to get in front of. Who is your audience? When I went through the personal branding methodology, and I went through it a few times, um, it's understanding who it is that I am speaking to, and what are the pain points, or what are the things that I'm solving for. And with my clients, we spend a considerable amount of time on, right? And it's we don't just talk about the internal state key stakeholders that who their audience is. It's also the industry people, right? Because you want to make sure that when you're looking at your career roadmap, you're factoring in whatever industry it is that you're working in, and who you need to connect with outside of the organization as well. And I think a lot of my clients, because they're young career professionals, they're focused solely on their higher, they're looking at their manager and the senior level people. But it's also important to look at your peers as well, because they could be your target audience as well, especially with how quickly things are evolving in the companies.
Right. Well, and like you said, the industry, because if your company is not doing well, if you have connections outside of your company, you have more, I call it buoyancy, right? And when you've got a really
Correct.
strong brand, you can move faster because you've got not just connections, but people who really know what you stand for and know what you're good at and have the picture of who you are and who you want to be or who you're becoming, because that's was the future piece too, not just right now.
Right. It's, looking at it, you want to build those connections early on in your career, continue to be engaging with those connections so that if there is an opportunity that comes up outside of the organization from one of your connections, you are top of mind for that person because you've demonstrated the value, right? You've kept up that connection. And they know who you are. They know that you have that strong brand and you've been able to articulate your skills, your unique skills to them so that when an opportunity comes up, they say, "Oh, I think this person will be a good match." And they'll reach out to
Right.
you.
Yes. And that's the challenge too, is people say, "Oh, I don't want to be bragging. I don't want to be pushy." And it, again, it's kind of a counterintuitive that when you really know what you want to be known for, then you don't have to be pushy because it's going to be more organic. How do you help
Yeah.
clients kind of get to that? What do you want to be known for place? Because that's a hard question to answer.
It is. And it's always, when we go through the methodology, the personal branding methodology, the extract phase, I feel in the work that I do with my clients on the younger side, it is sometimes painful for them to go through that because they don't feel that they have anything that's unique to them. And so when we go through that methodology, things start to come up and they say, "Oh yeah, that is me." Okay. And so they get clarity on it. I think the hardest part is when you go through the process, you come up with these attributes that bubble to the top, and then the work really starts to begin when you have to, bring it down to a couple, right? So also that the strongest brands are known for one thing, not many things, right? So you want to
Right.
make sure that you're positioning yourself in the minds of your target audience with that one thing that they associate you with, whatever that unique attribute is. So once we go through that methodology, things start to become clearer to them, and all those other attributes we can weave in to their story so that it just becomes natural for them to talk about it, right? And that they can pick and choose what they want to highlight in those interviews, or maybe it's they want to go for an internal promotion. They can then talk about their that unique attribute, but then they can weave in all those additional skills that fit within that job position, that role, and it flows easily.
Yes. Well, and we talked about this too, that I really love doing this with young people because your brand isn't necessarily what you've done. It's who you are and how you add value. And so students or young people that might struggle with, "Oh, I don't have that experience." But you still have your unique promise of value based on what you have done and connecting the dots there. And it sounds like you're talking about that, right? How do we help them connect those dots?
How do we help them connect the dots? And it's interesting. I recently spoke to a group, young professionals, and there. So I was doing some research, and I came across this stat from a recent stat from, I think it was Bureau of Labor Statistics, and they said early career professionals who can demonstrate consistent value can increase their earning potential 10 to 20% within the first 2 years. So I really focus with my clients on having them understand that value. So right, understanding their unique attributes, and then what's that value that they can bring to the organization, and just keep focusing on that, articulating that throughout that first couple of years that they're working inside an organization, so that they're consistent with it, they're flexible, they're adaptable, they can pivot, they raise their hand for additional projects, things that interest them. And that then gives them talking points for when they go in for that, say they identify an internal promotion they want to go for. Or maybe it's a project that they're really passionate about and they want to put their their name in the hat for. They can then back up their value by speaking to it much more clearer.
Yes, and I love this because this is what we're talking about with positioning. So I'll just put this up here. So we're going to do a session next Thursday on helping our clients position themselves for growth. And this is exactly what I see people struggle with is how do you identify what's going on in the organization, what gaps there are, where you plug in, but then you have to have that strong brand foundation to know these are the things I should raise my hand for. Because if you raise your hand for something that you're not real great at, that's going to go in the wrong direction, right? So
Exactly.
you've got to have that internal knowledge and be able to look at the market. And I've been teaching some things to high school counselors, and I said, this is a skill we could start teaching kids. I think even in junior high, let's look at a
Yes.
market. Let's look at a market and say, okay, this is the challenge in the market right now. What's the gap? And they don't know their brand, how they're going to fill it yet. But it's just a skill I find most people don't have is to look at a market and really think, or look at a company and really think, what are the opportunities here?
Yeah. And I think it's important, and I tell my clients this, and we do work around it, to make sure that they're meeting with different departments within an organization, because that gives you a much larger knowledge of how the company works so that you can understand that market, right? So having those conversations rounds out your knowledge, and so that you're not making decisions in this sort of silo, right? So those cross-functional teams and projects that you can get yourself on is really important, particularly in your early career.
Right. And that's what makes it from initiative or loose cannon. You're a loose cannon if you're not doing the research to know where to plug in. If you
Right.
do that research, then you can be seen as having initiative. Now, I think this is interesting. So John asked this question. So I don't know, I'll let you think about this, Jackie, but for me, I find that arrogance actually typically comes from a place of lack of confidence. So when someone is arrogant, usually they're trying to prove something or they really don't feel confident underneath, and helping them really connect with their true value. And it's kind of the same thing as entitlement. People sound entitled when they think they deserve something, but they're not quite sure why. And
Hmm.
branding helps people figure out, why do they deserve it? What is their strengths that they can connect to?
Yeah.
I don't know what you'd add to that.
I think I do a lot of work around, it's interesting when you talk about confidence. Particularly with the group that the demographic I work with, they don't have a lot of confidence. But when I take them through the methodology, things become clearer to them. So then once that becomes clearer to them, we go back to situations where they have an accomplishment, whatever accomplishment it is. We go through big accomplishments, small accomplishments, and we have that dialogue, and we write down how their skills were utilized or leveraged in that, right? And so we come up with all these different stories that they can leverage along the way, and they practice those stories so that it's top of mind for them. So when they are talking about their contributions or achievements in a confident manner, it doesn't come across as bragging, right? It's things that they did 100% accomplish. It's just, how can we create a narrative around it where it sounds like them when they deliver it? And so it's really about crafting those paragraphs of stories and then having them practice it so that when the time comes up, they already know that story. And so it's easier for them to articulate that achievement in a confident way. And I found
Yeah.
that that's worked really well.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And then, John, the other thing I would say is what we've been talking about in terms of your brand not being just about you, but how you serve your audience. that shifts the focus here too. So instead of just building this brand about how great you are and what you want to be known for, we're also connecting it to what's going on with your audience right now. What pain points are they experiencing? And really looking at how do you want to help them solve those problems in a collaborative way versus, hey, I'm so great, I can solve everything for you. And this is another thing that isn't positioning. And I'm sure we've all received these too. So you get an email, or I used to get things in the mail that said, your website sucks, we'll help you fix it, or whatever it is. Like, that is not
Yeah.
good positioning. That's
Yeah,
not good
I've
positioning.
gotten that too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that doesn't work. And so we want to find that place where we're finding the gaps and how we could help people, but how we approach it is critical.
Yeah. And I think it's also, and you talked about this a little earlier, Marie, when someone is talking about it in sort of a bragging way, let's just say, or there's they're talking about it in more of an aggressive way, and I'm this and that. It does stem from a lack of security. And so they're trying to overcompensate for that. And that's a red flag for organizations when somebody is, so it's, you have to have a balance. The flip side of it, with a lot of the women that I work with, they don't identify a lot of their accomplishments as being accomplishments because they minimize them. So it's a lot of conversations I have with drawing that out. Okay, so you did this, you volunteered here. Talk to me about what you did. Was there a leadership role that you did? Was there something creative that? And there's so many stories that they've sort of not looked at as any sort of accomplishment. And so we have, at the end of our sessions, we have multiple stories that they can tap into. So
And even that, I think it's easier for those people who are shy. What, I don't know what the right word is, but for people who don't want to tell their stories, when you think about it as, when have you solved those problems? When have you solved the problems that people are facing today? It feels less like bragging, because it's not all about me. It's about, this is the audience, this is the problems they're having. And we just need to demonstrate that you can solve those problems. And really the best way to do that is stories about when they've done it before in the past
right.
anyways.
Yeah. And it feels organic, and it feels it's who they are, and they're, more confident talking about it.
Yeah, and really branding is figuring out which stories matter for the individual and who they want to share with the world, and then which
Mhm.
stories matter for the audience and what they
Yeah.
need, what they value, and then finding those stories that really meet both.
Right, right. And that's why we usually have various stories, taking place. And so it's really, when can you plug those in, right? When is it appropriate to talk about this, or not even appropriate, when let's leverage this story to align with this job description or opportunity that's coming up, or you want to maybe speak at an event and you want to share your knowledge. What stories can you present on that stage that would resonate with your audience? So it's all of those little stories that my client will create, and they find that they have sort of a bucket full of these stories that they can just kind of pick and choose.
I love that. Well, and that's what creates the confidence, right?
Yeah.
Because now you've got this armory of stories that you can tell. And it also allows them to bring that quiet confidence, because they can put the story where it fits. They don't have to push it or feel like they're promoting themselves,
Right.
selling themselves.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Because they did it. It was 100% all them.
Yeah. Well, Jackie, I know we are getting ready for this session next Thursday. Um, so I'm excited for that. Why should people come? What would you say, just based on what we've done so far planning?
I think so I'm a huge, my background is branding in general. Personal branding enables you to really understand who you are at your core, which then helps you to make better decisions in regard to your career, to your life. Things just become a little bit more full circle. And I have found that because I've gone through the program a number of times, and it gives me the clarity, oh, okay, this organization doesn't really align with my goals and my vision. And it gives you the confidence to make those bolder career choices also, because you have that confidence in yourself. And I think personal branding is a foundational piece for anyone's career, particularly in a world that we live in where now everything is so global. So your competition is far greater, right? Because you could be interviewing for a job with people international as well, right? So having that differentiating factor of knowing your brand is such a huge tool to have.
Yes, yes. And we've got people trying to go industry to industry, figure out where all the toss-ups are going to put them. And when they're rooted
Hmm.
in that personal brand,
Yeah,
they're much more able to make those shifts because
right.
they know how the value that they can bring.
Exactly. They know the value. And also, they're not talking about their job role, they're talking about their unique attributes. So you're not pigeonholed to one particular job role, right? Oh, I'm a marketing person. Oh, I'm a salesperson. Oh, I'm accounting. You're leading with what makes you you.
I love that. That's so powerful. Well, thank
Yeah.
you for jumping on today. Thank you,
Thank
John,
you.
for all of your thoughts and comments.
Thanks, John, for the
Um,
good
yeah.
question.
All right, everyone. Well, we'll see you next Tuesday. Thank you so much, Jackie.
Have a great day.